All right, everybody. Happy to welcome back to the podcast, friend of the show, Republican strategist Mike Murphy. Mike, good to see you.
Thank you. Always a pleasure, Matt. Great to be here.
Well, I guess we have to start with this guilty verdict of Donald Trump in that New York hush money trial. Do you think does it matter? Do you think it will move the needle any direction?
I think it's too early to tell. I don't trust the snap polls. This is the kind of thing people have to kind of digest, think about. Excuse me. See, it's already given me the conniptions. So net, it was the worst outcome he could have had within the narrow scope of this trial. In other words, he could have had a hung jury, and I think Trump would have done a good job of portraying that as a vindication and, no jail can hold me. It's all put up. And thank God there was a juror who understood, blah, blah, blah. Instead, he got complete guilty. And a fast jury. They couldn't want to put the cuffs on him quick enough. So net, I think it's bad for Trump. In Trump world, it's fine. He'll raise a bunch of money, as he already has, or at least claims he has. You can never quite trust a Trump brag, but we're having FEC report. We're learning about all that. But, the jump on this election is a relatively small group of a couple 100,000 voters spread across 5, the Dems would say 7, maybe 6 states. And I don't think it helps. But as I've said all along, the dependent variable in this election is not what people think of Trump. They don't like him. It's what they think of Biden, who right now they want to fire. So if Biden can't fix Biden, the Trump stuff is important, but it's secondary. And to me, that's still the big critical issue. And so far, not great.
Any concerns or thoughts about, even though I agree this is like the worst scenario for the possible combination of the outcome of this trial for Donald Trump, but it was probably the weakest, I think clearly the weakest of the 4 trials.
Yeah, legally.
There are a lot of anti-Trumpers who are saying, I'm not a Trump fan, but this is a travesty of justice. This is, this was going after a political opponent. Alvin Bragg said he was going to take him down, yada, yada, yada. True or some of that, there may be elements of truth to it.
There's
I think
a carom shot
overblown.
element here. Right. But, what is the truth if we step back? Did they doctor the books? Yes, they did. That's a misdemeanor. Why did they doctor the books? Because they wanted to? It was fun? No. They doctored the books trying to cover up something. What were they covering up? Well, a sex scandal in the middle of a presidential campaign. So, they had the intent, which is fundamentally what the conviction's about. So while I agree it is the weakest of the cases, it's still legit. And it didn't take the jury of his peers long to figure that out. So the subtext of all its political attacks is the venue, which, in other words, the argument behind that is, well, any trial in New York is illegitimate because it's a Democratic city. So that means we can no longer have a legal system in New York. Great. We can't have one in Utah either, or Texas, or Alabama. So we don't, it was a fair trial. He contested it, and the jury overwhelmingly convicted him. Now, the other charges trouble me personally more, but I don't think you can write it all off and declare that Alvin Bragg is a black Democrat, so therefore it's illegitimate. That's junta stuff. That is banana republic stuff. And it's shameful, frankly. The Republican Party that I proudly fought for when it was a Burkean conservative party for decades has become such a cult of personality for a convicted felon. I never would have thought it 20 years ago. It still stuns me. And the fact that this cosplay faction now, where they dress up and go to the trial in a red tie and everything, is disgusting. Doug Burgum knows better. They all do. But in the gamification of American politics, do whatever it takes to win the reality show of the presidency. That wasn't true when we had world crises and your presidential vote had real meaning and stakes. Will your kid go to war? Will there be a Great Depression? Will you starve? Now it's just channel 82, drunken housewives on a party bus, change the channel. Now it's Donald Trump. So I hate to be so depressing and cynical about it, but it's troubling to me. And, I'm going to vote for Biden, and I'm a conservative. I'm not crazy about that vote. I have doubts about his age and everything like everybody does. But this Trump thing is a cancer. And yet more evidence, yet the party wants to go into this zombie state where it apparently doesn't mean anything because Alan Bragg looks like a Democrat. Everybody's corrupt. It's corrupt until proven uncorrupt. That is the fundamental operating principle of Trump rhetoric.
Yeah, and it's totally poisoned everything. Let me ask you this. Who has surprised you the most over the last 8 years, 8 or 9 years, in terms of somebody that went Trumpy or went MAGA that who has disappointed you the most?
My meter is broken. I mean, I chuckle when I think about. I like J.D. Vance's book, and he called me up to ask about running for Senate as an anti-Trump Republican. We had quite a thoughtful conversation about it. And now I see he's got the red cap literally spot welded to his head. I know he doesn't believe any of it deep down. So he's a disappointment. Nikki's always a disappointment. I was for her against Trump, but I knew she believes in Nikki. So I can't say I'm disappointed by her. I was not surprised. Rubio can slide under a closed door, so I'm not too surprised by him. I don't know Burgum, but I know he's a real person with a real business record and people who think a lot of him. And he couldn't race to sell himself out quicker. There are like, burn marks on his feet from how fast he ran over. And he did it in the campaign too. But I guess if I had to give an award for somebody who really has been loathsome in all this, would be Tim Scott, who in his Senate career had been a bit careful about Trump. He was not a big MAGA senator. He did the minimum stuff that they all do. And maybe even a little more than that because he has a South Carolina electorate. So maybe I'll give it the South Carolina prize because Scott is totally just toadied himself into a caricature. And I gotta say, my old friend Lindsey Graham, who people forget was the original anti-Trump candidate in 2016 during his brief, maybe instructively brief presidential primary campaign. He really went after Trump. Jeb, to his credit, never drank the Kool-Aid and went after Trump. Rubio's been in and out a couple times on that thing. But Lindsey had it totally right and then couldn't get it more wrong, almost flaunting it. So I guess I'm going to give the Palmetto political Quisling award to both of them with honorable assist now to Nikki. There must be something in the water there.
Well, you make an interesting point because Nikki made it out of the White House, out of the administration, fairly unscathed, and then went back in, and then went back out. But she had made it out of the administration without completely humiliating herself, and
and she was always sending dog whistles, and in private, totally. So she looked like she was in typical Nikki overthink way, trying to kind of navigate it, and had some success by being the last person standing. And, I wrote a Substack after when it was time for her to get out. And I said, the move for her, if she wants to run again, and knowing Nikki, of course she does, is go away, Greta Garbo, disappear, let the mystery build. And during the convention, put out a terse written statement that she always supports the Republican nominee, because you don't want to be in the primaries in 4 years having been for Biden. But do the minimum, but go away and then come back as the I told you so candidate after the disastrous midterms when Trump gets destroyed, if he wins, if not losing to Biden. So Trump's heading for catastrophe. It's a matter of timing politically from a Republican point of view. But instead, of course, they've got to get her out there, moth the flame. And so she's at some Hudson Institute thing, which she didn't need to be at. And she took the question, and now speculation is rising, and maybe they want this, that she'd be a pick for VP. Now, Trump would need a few more food testers. I triple the number. And I think Trump is too feral to ever smell the ambition on her, never want to put her in a position of leverage on him. But yeah, she has done everything wrong here in the last 2 weeks to really undercut everything that she actually got right in the campaign, late as it was.
Now, Donald Trump is someone who has been impeached twice, indicted 4 times, found liable of sexual assault, found guilty of a crime in New York. And yet he is, according to some polls, winning the presidential race against Joe Biden. Do you think, is Biden's problem just that he's too old? Is it inflation? What's the deal? How is this possible?
Well, yeah, what the Trump numbers really tell you is this election is about Biden. Because if the election were about Trump, he'd be losing. It's the joke we all tell in the consulting business that somehow the Democrats have nominated the one candidate Donald Trump could be, and the Republicans have nominated the one candidate Joe Biden can be, because they're both politically weak. I think Biden's problems are a kind of a combination that is the sum of the parts are bigger than the whole. One, he is old, and whether or not it's fair or not, blah, 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 politics, perceptions, reality. When you ask people about Biden, the first thing they say is old. Looks old, talks old, is old. That's the thing. Then inflation, the great politician killer. Because with inflation, and Paul Begala, I'm stealing this line from him, it's a good way to explain it. When you watch the same things go through the checkout line, and they cost more every month or every week, you blame that on the president. When you get a raise, because inflation is lifting all things, that's you. I did a good job. I earned that raise. Biden had nothing to do with it. So, excuse me, got a little cold today. And so that's a problem. And then Biden has made it worse because Biden has the old incumbent thing of political communication being about, hey, voter, here's what I did for you. I got this passed. I did that. National Woodchuck Day. That was me. You owe me your vote. So often, not always, but often, too often, when Biden's talking about the economy, and he did it on CNN a few weeks ago, he wants to say, no, people don't get it. We're doing great. Things are fantastic. And out in voter world, where perception is the reality, not economic statistics, they're like, this guy's too old and he doesn't get it. So time for a change. I mean, the deadliest polling number right now is not the horse race or the swing state ballot test. It is, admitting you don't like Trump, you don't like Biden, but who's better at running the economy? And Trump is not beating him by 3 points. He's beating him by 15 to 18 points. And that equals fire Biden. You cannot forget in a presidential reelect, the first decision people make is not, do I want, high papillorum or low papahirum, as Huey Long would say. It is, do I keep or fire the guy I got? And Biden is failing the fire test right now. They want to get rid of him. So the Biden campaign now is running a hybrid of the Carter 80 and Hillary 16 campaign. The Carter 80 campaign was, people are mad at Jimmy, but nobody's going to vote for a crazy old washed up movie actor from California. He's a right-wing crank and used to make movies with a chimp. Well, it turns out when they were ready to fire Carter, they were ready to take a shot on Reagan. The Hillary campaign is, let me tell you how bad how bad Trump is. Why are we going to vote for Hillary? And so the Biden guys, they got Bob De Niro, who's a tremendous actor and a patriot, and is 118 narrating a spot all about Trump being a jerk. People know Trump's a jerk. It's built in. But if they think he's a jerk who can run the economy, it's very likely he'll win the presidency. My final Biden thing I ran about is what's the offer, as we say in advertising? What do you get in a second term from Biden other than no Trump? I don't know. And I do this for a living. I could get an electron microscope out. I don't think I can find it in the Biden campaign.
Yeah.
So these are problems they have about an hour to fix now. The time is ticking away.
I mean, if Jimmy Carter and Hillary Clinton are the two models, it's trouble for Joe Biden. I want to ask you, what were they thinking? To me, the Robert De Niro thing seemed weird. It seemed like a non sequitur. I don't understand it. Was there a method to the madness? Why do that?
I think, De Niro's famous. That'll get attention to the ad. It'll show older white guys. I don't know. Whatever it was, it's not the thing. They're doing what I call the easy meeting, which is they all get up early and they're working hard, and we're going to reelect the president. And they go to a fun meeting about how do we screw over Trump. And they look at ads and, hey, we got Bob De Niro to do the voice. Well, great. This one will really get it. But the afternoon meeting nobody shows up for is the how do we fix Biden meeting, because they don't know how, and they don't think, my suspicion is they don't think Biden will allow himself to be fixed. So they're spending all the time on the easy stuff. It's just like digital in campaigns. Digital is very, very important in the modern campaign, but it's often more fun to figure out the plumbing and wiring question of, here's our new targeted thing. We're going to cross cell phone telematics with voter AI-driven machine learning, blah, blah, blah. But forget the pipes. What's the water? What's the message? New Coke had really good technology to put a can in your supermarket shelf where nobody bought it.
All right, let's take a quick break. And I just want to encourage you, if you like what we do here, please go to patreon.com/Matt Lewis and support us. There's also some cool merch you can get. We've got a coffee mug that, frankly, I love. I use all the time. And an autographed copy of one of my books, like Too Dumb to Fail or Filthy Rich Politicians. And of course, the most important part, you'll be helping us do what we do here. Thank you in advance, and let's get back to the show. I mean, obviously, Biden is old and he's lost his step, but isn't there anyone else running the show? Like, I listen to Bill Scher, Simon Rosenberg, Tim Miller, different commentators and strategists on their podcasts and conversations, and they will quite often say, Biden should do this, Biden's team, or they'll just be making the case against Trump. And I'm like, look, if Biden could make it as eloquently as you just did, he'd be winning. Why aren't there any surrogates that can
I don't know. This is
deliver the message for Biden?
Yeah, I mean, I've been honking this one for a year on Hacks on Tap, the pod I do with Axelrod and Gibbs. Why Biden has a bunch of young superstars, Buttigieg, Gina Raimondo, Mitch Landrieu, who's like in the witness relocation program now, a gifted natural politician. Why aren't they everywhere doing the action team? I don't get it. I would surround Biden with them. Now, I think what the Biden people think, well, they make him look old. Well, we know he's old. That secret is out. That battle is over. So if you make it about them too, you don't only prop up Biden, you also send the press scurrying over to look at the Trump team, which looks like, and this is an old reference for you kids out there, a Jeff McNally cartoon of the United Nations. I don't know, from the Chicago Tribune. You can Google him, Jeff McNally. He used to do these great UN cartoons. I thought you were going to say the Cats and
Jammer Kids.
Well, I won't go back that far. I don't want to lose your entire audience. But the McNally cartoons were these fine pen sketches, and there'd be a rabbit, a guy with a pot over his head. I mean, it was like the great rogues gallery of knuckleheads and fools. So that's a good comparison for Biden. They ought to start that fight. But, again, I don't get it. I think Biden thinks I beat Trump before I can beat him again. I don't need a lot of this advice. I'm the pro. I've done it. Unlike the great Hillary Clinton, who everybody told me I had to step aside for in 2016, I actually won. And fair enough. But take this debate. So when every once in a while, God bless them, the New York Times goes out and does a poll of the swing states, and it's been bad for Biden. So big panic breaks out in the Democratic world, as it is wont to do. First time the State of the Union got them out of the panic. They did a good job. They exceeded expectations. Kudos to them. I don't know if they had Dr. Landry Jr. or somebody. I don't know how they did it, but salute to Joe Biden for a good State of the Union. And it worked. Now they have a new bad New York Times poll of the swing states, and they got another huge panic breaking out. So they said, well, we got to restart the race. They're right. We will do a debate challenge. Maybe Trump will fall for it. We're going offense. Smart. I'd do it. But they've also shoved every chip they have into it, because if the Biden I saw on CNN shows up and lectures people about the economy, that's going to be a very bad night. If calm, grown up, wait for his shot, sharp, State of the Union-esque Biden shows up and Trump is crazy grievance monster like he has been after the trial and before that, but really now, it could be a great night for Biden and the reset they need. But if they get CNN economy night, Trump's going to win the debate pretty big. And then the biggest panic in the history of the Democratic Party is going to break out. I think people are underestimating how far off the rails it could be. No incumbent president in recent history that I know of, maybe there is somebody, you can email me, but I can't find anybody who made a big move pre-convention in their reelect with this kind of risk. So I'm glad they're doing it for two reasons. One, it's the right move to reset everything if they can execute. If they can't execute, I am for the panic. I am for people calling on Biden to step aside, because the stakes are too high with Trump to monkey around with the vanity of a second term that really ought not be, even though the first term was, from a Democratic point of view, pretty damn successful. So I think we could be in for a real moment where people in the party ask Biden to leave. They can't force him out, but they might be able to shame him out. And if he blows the debate, they should, and he should.
Do you think that there are people out there, like, is there a smoke-filled room? Is there a party boss? Are there people who are thinking this way and actually could execute this conversation?
Well, there are a lot of people thinking this way. There's no room with power. Biden is the nominee unless Biden and Jill Biden, Joe Biden and Jill Biden decide they don't want to be. Kind of like, I mean, the somewhat analogy is LBJ after he was embarrassed in the New Hampshire primary, he just got out. Now, I think he probably could have still muscled through the convention and been the nominee, but he didn't want the humiliation and everything. So there will come a moment where Biden's got to really think this thing through. If he doesn't want to go, they can't force him out. Now, if he does say, fine, I step aside, that opens a new fascinating can of worms. Because how do you pick the new nominee? You know, well, it gets down to the delegates in the DNC, which means the most powerful people in the room will be Biden, who will have a voice in this, Senate leaders, and frankly, the head of the teacher and public employee unions, you know, teachers, SEIU, et cetera, because the actual delegate bodies, if free to do their own thing, are, you know, the biggest majority will be members of those two unions, or at least the biggest combined plurality. And then you've got the whole issue of identity. There will be a lot of people of color, and will they demand Kamala, even though politically that is not the way out of the Biden problem? Gretchen
No.
Whitmer and Ralph Warnock are, or some equivalent that is a younger, more aggressive ticket that can beat Trump. So I don't know. I'm hoping Biden has a great night, resets the race, and Donald Trump is not president. But it's an interesting political strategy because being pre-convention with a candidate who's a bit of, you know, there's a certain risk when you watch him on the high wire. There could be a real earthquake. And most people say you're crazy, he's stubborn, he'll be the nominee, and they're probably right. But I think there's some cracks in the structure here that I don't think people realize. That's my big crazy insight that people don't agree with. My other big insight is I'm trying to invent. Do you have time for an indulgent story about the
Please,
media and
always,
process? So years ago, I
always.
won't name them, a Democratic pollster buddy and I decided we'd have a race because to get a phrase into the New York Times or Washington Post. As much as we love political journalists and journalism, there's a tendency to want to find the gimmick. Soccer moms, you know, white collar new tech dads or whatever. So we invented one. Uptinos, upwardly mobile Latinos. And we had a big race. I won't get into what happened other than the then editor of the New York Times, when I told the story of the election, I thought was going to throw a glass of water at me. Well, the one this time I'm trying to invent, and this one is actually true, is the election comes down to pop versus soda. If you say pop, you're in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and most of Wisconsin, and those are the states where Biden has a better edge in the Electoral College. If you say soda in the swing states, you're talking about Georgia, Nevada, which is the worst looking for Biden right now, and Arizona. So if Biden can get the pop vote from Scranton all the way to Rhinelander, Wisconsin, and probably get the single electoral college from Nebraska, which with Maine are the only two that don't do winner take all, and there's a 50-50 congressional district that has one vote, that could do it. So the pop vote could get them there, with the uncomfortable caveat that in that key single electoral vote congressional district in Omaha, Nebraska, they say soda. So Biden needs one soda and 3 pops. That's the presidential strategy.
And some
So
places
we'll
just
see if
call
they're
everything
listening in the
Coke,
debate.
right?
He'll say, I could use a glass of pop right now. Go ahead.
That's cheap pandering to the
Totally.
Rust Belt. All right, let me just end with some maybe evergreen questions that I'm curious about for whatever reason. So, who is somebody either in history or somebody that you knew that you regard as the best the best political strategist that you've worked with, learned about? Who do you admire?
Well, I'll give you a Hall of Fame because different eras, hard to pick a champ. But James Carville's very smart, and that Clinton 92 campaign is remarkable. I was a big fan in his prime of David Garth, who worked out of Pennsylvania. He worked Pennsylvania, did Heinz, but New York in the kind of early age of television. He had these great in-your-face campaigns with great, damn tough job deserves a damn tough guy, and a tough town needs a tough mayor. Anyway, Garf was, in my view, really, really good. Ailes had a great gut for politics. So did Atwater. I got to work with both of those guys. And Ailes, when I was around him, wasn't a crazy perv either, I got to say. I think later in life, maybe he had some troubles, sadly, kind of tragically. They were all, big in different ways, impressions on me. Arthur Finkelstein, who was kind of a brilliant, crazy pollster, had a great analytical mind. I learned a lot from him. So I was lucky. I was I'm kind of at the end of my era, and I came in at the end of that era with the Bobby Goodmans. Ailes kind of transposed both, but the Garfs, Arthur, and some of those people. So they were all very, very good, and they would all agree on one thing: nothing is more important than message, which is a little lost today. Now we're into the technology, organizational mumbo jumbo, all of which is accretive and important, but message wins. And I should give a salute to my buddy David Axelrod, great strategic consultant. Bob Shrum in his prime, fantastic. And my old partner Alex Castellanos knew what he was doing too. Learned a lot from him.
And you have worked for some very prominent, famous politicians, including John McCain, Mitt Romney, I think, and Arnold Schwarzenegger, just to name three.
Yeah, I did Romney's
who's
governor's
the best
race.
and what? Right.
Yeah.
Who's the best and what makes a good candidate?
Arnold's the best performer because that's what he does. McCain is the most interesting. And of the three of them, if I had to pick, and it's hard, I think Romney would have been the best president.
How come?
I don't know. There's something. I mean, McCain would have been great, and McCain, if the country was in a crisis, he'd be a great clutch leader because he was fearless and tough and smart. But Romney is Elliot Ness. He's incorruptible. He's very, very smart. He's and look, he's one of the few incorruptible guys in the modern Republican Party. And he was a good governor, a great executive leader. McCain was a good crusader, and again, in a crisis, would have been a great president. But the Senate was good for McCain. He could pick lonely fights and win them. Romney was a smart executive who would have run the country well, and he has a compass that never veers.
What'd you make of Romney recently came out?
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Romney recently came out and said that Biden should have pardoned Donald Trump and that he should have, my interpretation, that he should have pressured these district attorneys to drop their cases against Trump.
Yeah, I haven't read the exact comments, but I know the argument, which is we shun presidents, we don't imprison them. Nixon being the model. My pushback on that, I don't disagree with Mitt on much, but it's a legit argument that you don't throw the former president of the United States in the lockup because it polarizes things even more. But Nixon, to his great credit, he's looking better every year, had shame. And the system worked with Nixon because Nixon allied to it. Just like after Mayor Daley stole the election in '68, Nixon's political people came to him and said, you've got to make a stink out of this. And Nixon said, no, I'm not going to tear the country apart. On the other hand, it put a dent in his psyche, and he came back, all right, no more Mr. Nice Guy, in 1960, against Kennedy. So I know where Mitt's coming from on that, but because Trump operates outside the normal boundaries of shame and honor, I think more brutal tactics are required.
All right. We'll leave it there. Anything you want to plug?
Oh, well, always at Murphy Mike on Twitter. And I'm an old Detroit boy, and I care about the American auto industry, and I don't really want the Chinese to have 80% of auto manufacturing in 15 to 20 years. So I started something called evrepublicans.org and also the evpoliticsproject.org, evpolitics.org. You can check it out on the website. We have some fun polling about what the divide over electric vehicles is about. And we have a great quiz you can take about all the myths you're here on Fox News and other places. EVs are vital to the industrial future of the United States. We We got to get Republicans to stop thinking dogma and start thinking what's the better vehicle. So I encourage people to go to evpolitics.org or evrepublicans.org, same place, and check it out and take the quiz.
Excellent. And of course, listen to Hacks on Tap, which I see that cool sign behind you, where you regularly podcast. And Mike Murphy, always a pleasure. Thanks for coming back on.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it.